Welcome to the Nobody Guide to Life, where we provide tips and tools for personal growth, personal development, and your spiritual journey that you can use right now in your everyday life. I'm J.A. Plosker. Thank you for joining us. You can always find out more at nobodiesview.com and thenobodybible.com, or check us out on Twitter and Facebook at Nobody's View. Our show notes are at nobodiesview.com, and if you like what you hear, we'd welcome a subscription or a review. We'd appreciate it. When I was working with clients in my social work counseling days, I would often ask them about coping skills that they use to get through difficult times, to help them with addiction, to help them when they were struggling with depression and anxiety. And I remember one thing always stood out to me, and that was music. Clients would tell me over and over again that listening to music, singing along with music, sometimes really loudly, was a way they dealt with feelings of anxiety, the ways they pulled themselves out of depression. So my clients in recovery would tell me that they use music to distract from their momentary cravings. It was an effective tool for them, and it was something that I always encouraged. And I know that for many of you listening, music is probably a constant companion for you. So whether you're in the car or at work, and you probably have songs that get you through difficult times or bring back good memories from you. And I know music is definitely a powerful force. And I think my guest today would agree. Todd Herzog is an award-winning musician, an artist who says that the raw material of life is what creates his style of soulful, spiritual, acoustic pop, music along the lines of John Mayer and Jason Mraz. And Todd's worked with big industry names like Burt Bacharach and Dave Koz, and on his recent album, Something to Believe In, Todd is working to share songs of personal revelation and shared humanity. He's now a cantorial soloist, a creator, performer, and a musical messenger who has shared his gift at houses of worship of many denominations. And you can find out more about him at toddherzog.com. That's TODDHERZOG.com. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, it's great to have you here. I gave that introduction about music because it's such a powerful and important force for people that I was working with in that counseling setting. Could you take us back a little bit into your history and maybe tell us a little bit about your path of personal growth, your personal journey? How did you come to music?
Music is something that has always just been a part of me. I would sing, from the time I was 3 years old. In fact, one of my earliest memories is sitting in the back seat of the car, and my stepmom, who was a kindergarten teacher, says to my dad, Howie, he can really sing. And, she was used to kindergartners not being able to kind of carry a tune. And
Right.
And so the fact that I could even sing on key at that stage in life was something that was unique for her. And but yeah, singing and music has just been part of me for pretty much as long as I can remember. And I definitely relate to what you said in your intro about using music as this kind of coping mechanism. I also remember just being a teenager and getting upset about something. You just go in your room and crank it up as loud as you can. And I'm sure much to my parents' dismay. So music is definitely filled that function for me for a long time.
How did you work with music early on? Because you said that you can remember singing from age 3. And I think in this show we talk a lot about it's that journey of personal growth, that journey of spirituality. As you were making that journey through your life with music, how did you work with it? What were some of the things, how did you integrate music into your life? And how did you first discover that it had maybe a spiritual power or a transformative power for you?
Well, like I said, music has always been a part of things. From the time I was let's say I started playing violin in 3rd grade, and I was, immediately moved by when they came in and they did the demonstration of the instrument and,
Right.
Which one do you want to play? And I'm like, yeah, I want to play that one. So I started studying violin. I played that all the way through college, and so I was exposed to classical music and folk music and improvisation and stuff like that having to do with the violin. I do distinctly remember the first time that I ever sang into a microphone. I think I was in the choir in fifth grade, and I got a solo for John Denver's "Sunshine on My Shoulders," and I got to
Ah,
sing. I got to
classic.
sing into the microphone, and I was like, "Whoa, that is cool!" Because you hear all the little nuances in your voice that you just never can hear without the amplification. So I, as I got older, I played in orchestras, and I also played in a rock band called Noise, Noize, in high school, which was very fun. And just thought that that was going to be my path, when I went to college. And instead, I ended up getting involved with an a cappella group in college at Tufts University called the Beelzebubs. And that was just a really unique experience to see, number one, just the different textures and sounds that you could create with your voice, but also
Right.
the sense of community that you could create by making music with your peers. And the Bubs had the added benefit of having this sort of large alumni association, so it connected me not just to guys my own age, but just a whole community of other singers and professionals, and we were able to, through the music, share life experiences and losses and joys and all of that. So that was just an incredible experience to be part of. And then through that music, I got to meet a woman named Rachel Simon. She was someone who was going through a bone marrow transplant at age 24. And so one of the first ways that I got to meet her was a friend of mine had told me about what was going on with her. And we just, as a group, the Bubs decided, like, well, she lives right over in Newton. Let's just go and sing for her. And it was this gift that we were able to offer her, and that created a connection. And so again, I was seeing how music could, inspire people and heal people. And Rachel and I ended up keeping in touch, and then we, after she went through this bone marrow transplant, we ended up dating for 4 years. And unfortunately, she ended up passing away when she was 28. But that was another, for me, an experience of relying on music to heal from that experience. And that experience kind of gave birth to my first album of original songs, and it was dealing with all of these life and death kinds of issues, which I never anticipated dealing with at that early a stage in life. But it was really the music that helped me to I guess find the beauty in the experience as much as I could, and then to share that experience with other people, with fans, with even in film and television. Some of those songs led to placements there, and I would get feedback from people who had heard the music, but really for me the most powerful kinds of feedback were the emails that I would get from people saying, I was going through a really difficult time in my life, and I heard
Right.
this song of yours, and it just spoke to me, and it helped me to kind of get through to the other side of that dark place. And for me, those were like the most rewarding kinds of feedback that I would receive on my work.
Let me ask you a question. Let's go back a little bit. You said that you went with the group and sang for Rachel, and then she passed away. When you were writing that music, where did it feel like that music that you were writing came out of? Kind of in your soul, I guess, is
Yeah,
the
well,
question.
I think you've essentially answered the question with the question, and it definitely came um, straight out of this very raw kind of emotion and um, soul searching and trying to make sense of um, what I was going through, because I had always had the sense that life was supposed to unfold in a certain kind of way. And this experience with Rachel just presented the first real, I guess, collision with reality. Um,
Right.
and, it forced me to just reevaluate everything. Um, and
Right.
so, yeah, I'd say it came from my heart, came from my soul, it came from um, the grief, but it also came from this sense of hope that despite the outward appearances, that there was still joy and love and good things to look forward to in life.
Right. And I want to emphasize that piece there because you talked about this collision, and I think when we're traveling that path of we're always traveling that path of
Mm-hmm.
personal growth. We're always sort of on that
Yeah.
spiritual journey, and we come to believe that it's supposed to progress. We expect it to progress in certain ways. And when something comes along that challenges us, we think we're growing and then we're
Right.
forced to grow. And that tool, because that's what we're really about on this show, is those tips and tools. And to hear you talk so passionately about how you applied the tool of music to really help you shape that experience is very important. Did you realize at the time that you were writing those songs, how conscious was that process for you?
Yeah. I mean, I knew that I was writing the songs because um, it was the only thing that was worthwhile enough for me to be spending my time working on.
Right.
And it was the only thing that I could see during that time. And in fact, um, after having created those songs, I went through a long period of like, okay, now what do I write about? Because
Right.
after you deal with such kind of heavy, weighty issues, um, it's sort of difficult to just go back and write a love song or write about the going out and partying with your friends, because everything else seems to kind of pale in comparison. Um, but in terms of my consciousness, I mean, I think coming up against this whole illness and everything with Rachel was something that forced me to dig deeper spiritually. I guess I'd always considered myself somewhat of a spiritual person, but
Right.
this this experience kind of deepened I began meditating twice a day, and I began writing in journals and um, creating this music, and it was all looking for a method of expression, just to kind of take it from the bottled up feeling that I had within me and give it expression somehow.
Once you had that release, that was an interesting point you made about, now that I've written about such deep things, what's left? And I think about people I know that are writing books in this
Mm-hmm.
space. And, I wrote a book in this space that had been in me for many
Yeah.
years. And then you turn to write
Right.
something else. And you come to a place where you're like, wait a minute, that was the deep well within me of 30, 40, 50 years
Right.
or whatever, and now is that well empty? How did you, as an artist, as a creator, how do you work with that? Where do you go from there? When you were faced with that kind of creative crisis, how did you move in the new direction to write more material?
Um, I think it's a combination of um, learning tools. Like I've done a lot of stuff with, I don't know if you're familiar with Julia Cameron and The Artist's Way, and um, she has a number of books that deal with the subject of creativity and
Right.
returning to kind of your inner artist, your inner child. And so I think it's a combination of working with tools like that and also just the passage of time and, being aware of the person and the creative being that you are becoming, and honoring that. And then, it's just the next um, things in life that come up and provide that inspiration. So I guess I allow my surroundings to impact me. And so, for example, as I became more involved with Judaism and my faith, then some of the material that I created was based on that tradition or connected to a piece of text or a holiday, or something along those lines. So the sort of the emphasis or the focus of my creativity has gone through varying subject matters and even styles. And I think the main thing is to try to continue to listen to where you're at that moment, and to be authentic about that, and not try to create something that you think, I mean, unless you're writing for a specific project or a TV show or something,
Right.
if you're just writing for, your own artistic expression and healing, that you just kind of, you need to pay attention to um, what your own intelligence is telling you.
You said something back there about becoming, and you've been talking about being in the moment. I think there's a tendency for just people in general, when you talk about personal growth, you talk about the path of personal development. And I think sometimes there's a tendency for people to kind of maybe lose steam, where you resolve an issue that's been plaguing you, and like we were talking about before, and you just kind of land in a place where you're not sure what to do
Right.
next. And I think it's important to be aware of the fact that, life is constantly feeding us new material. Just because we've been focused on one particular piece doesn't mean that when we clear one obstacle or clear one hurdle, that's
Yeah.
the end. And I think that's what's so powerful about writers who keep writing, musicians who keep creating. Musicians will put out a concept album or something, maybe around a one failed
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And then a few years later, they come out with their next album, and it has a brighter
Mm-hmm.
tone to it. And I think that's such an important message for people listening that are maybe feeling kind of stuck, is have the courage to keep going, to work your way through that obstacle, because you want to work through what's happening, but you also want to get excited and have a sense of optimism about what comes after that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, what are your thoughts about that as someone who does keep producing music, who is a musician for a living? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, certainly, I think that there's there's a tendency, maybe even among fans, to, they fell in love with this one record or this one sound from this artist, and they
Right.
want to hear the next same thing from that artist. And so as an
Right.
artist, it's, it's, you need to be courageous in honoring your own, path, um, and hope that your fans will want to come along for the ride. But I guess one thing that you said, I think it's worth mentioning, that you can get to these places of where, okay, you've completed one project. It's okay to give yourself the time and the space to just sit still for a little while.
Right.
And you don't have to feel like, okay, what's next. And I think that's kind of where I connect it with the beauty of meditation, is that there has to be a place for stillness, and then at the, when it's appropriate, when the time, they say there's a season for everything. So then when it's appropriate, you move into the next stage, and maybe that is taking action and moving in a new direction. But the stopping after completion and kind of integrating what you've learned from the past project is a worthwhile and a necessary step, I think.
The reason I talk about optimism as a motivator is because when we come out of places like the counseling world and whatnot, sometimes it's very hard for people to maintain a sense of stillness. So they're in a constant being either pulled towards the future or being pulled back, and the present is very, very chaotic. And a lot of times I noticed my clients would use as a coping skill, we would use goal setting. So what we would do is we wouldn't just think about this moment. We would set goals. Maybe it was even goals for the end of the day, goals for next week, goals for next month. And by setting those goals, you plant a seed of optimism. And I think if you plant that seed of optimism, that helps to clear a space of stillness. Because if you see a light at the end of the tunnel, for some of my clients, it was getting their children back, or completing an education, or being able to maintain sobriety for another day, or being able to get through a difficult situation, maybe a court appearance they were dealing with, without having overwhelming anxiety. Those senses of progress, of optimism, create a sense of movement, but they also create a place for stillness. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think there's a beautiful way that movement and stillness work together, and ironically dance together, even though one is still.
I guess it's similar to in music itself. Of course, you have the notes, but then you have the spaces in between the notes. Right. And if you just had music, then you just sometimes need a little counterbalance or a place to breathe to more appreciate the other things that are happening.
I love that. And there's a sense of anticipation. If you know that song well, right, those breaks, the break before that big crescendo, that's what makes that big crescendo so special. If the whole thing was a crescendo, you would just be listening to noise. So I love that. Take me into your current position. You mentioned you're a musician in the Jewish world and a cantorial soloist. Take me into that transition and what that says, how that speaks to you, how you were drawn to that.
Sure. A number of years ago, I think it was back in 2004, I realized I needed to find something to kind of supplement where I was financially and just to give me a different direction. And so I ended up working at a Jewish high school. I was in Los Angeles at the time, in the San Fernando Valley, and I was a instrumental music teacher, instrumental band teacher, and I thought I would walk in and teach the kids about klezmer music and authentic Jewish stuff, even though I had very little background in that myself. I thought, well, these are day school kids; they'll get it, and could not have been further from the truth. They wanted to play Green Day and Blink 182 and Fall Out Boy, and I realized that if I did that, I would lose my job. So we kind of came to a compromise, and we ended up writing music that was initially connected in some small way to a piece of text or a holiday or something, and we could still make it cool. That was the key with the high school students. Like, you still had to make it hip and sound good and be fun to play, but it would have kind of multiple layers to it. And in the pop music world, I had never experienced that sort of layers upon layers upon layers of meaning. There's a lot of thoughts going through my head about this, but I mean, even in Judaism itself, as I've come to learn, when you're looking at a piece of text, you could read it just on the surface level, and then you can go a little bit deeper into the meanings behind it, and then you can go a little deeper and discover what some of the other sages in the tradition have said about this particular thing, and there are other insights that and then you get to like the very base of the meaning of the piece, and that's called the sod, the essence of
Right.
of what it is. So there's these multiple realities that are existing at the same time, and I think that's the thing that I have come to appreciate about composing in the Jewish world and in the spiritual world, is that you are free to explore very deep things musically. And don't get me wrong, I fought it all the way, did not want to kind of label myself or pigeonhole myself as a Jewish musician. But, so this has been kind of a process of the last, 14, 15 years,
Right.
that I have kind of come to embrace that part of myself and see the beauty in writing in this atmosphere. And so when I moved to Phoenix in 2006, I ended up doing some music at a few temples around town, and then eventually in January of 2008, I started my tenure at Temple Solel in Paradise Valley, which is where I'm currently the cantorial soloist. And so that means that I have the opportunity to create music for services and work with the choir and teach the preschool kids. And so I interact with many of the different populations at the temple. And so doing music for services is a whole different layer, because it's like praying and singing at the same time, and when it's really good, then it's almost like this whole separate sense of self just disappears. And I don't know if you've had that experience in meditation or music or sports, or when you're in the zone, like they say.
Right.
So I find that provides me the opportunity to find that space musically and through singing and prayer.
So you found a way to completely incorporate your passion, the tool that really helps you. You've just made your entire life is that.
Yeah. I think you've summed up my mission.
Well, that brings us to the question then. So what's that tip or tool then from your experience that you can offer to listeners? So using your background, what's something that we can use right now, right after this podcast in our everyday lives to help with personal growth in the spiritual journey?
Sure. I mean, I personally have found that the power of just singing every day, whether it's, just in the shower or in the car, or something that I've found that has been really useful is just even wordless melodies. In Judaism, they're called nigunim, right? So these wordless melodies or chants that you can just repeat over and over and over again. And there are tons of examples of this online. But just to kind of sing, and the vibrations kind of open up your body, and the repetition kind of somehow turns off your conscious mind, and you just sort of lose yourself in the process of making music. And I think the fact that you're singing, even if you don't have a great voice, it just awakens something within you to create that vibration literally in your body. And I think it's really healing to do that. At least that I have found that for myself, that if I can chant for 5, 10, 15 minutes each day, it changes your perspective on things.
I love that. And those are the most powerful tools. That's what we're all about. Simple and effective. I'd like to thank you, Todd. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course.
I want to let everyone know, reflecting on the things that Todd has had to say about the power of music. Remember, you don't have to be Pavarotti. You just have to be willing to make a sound. And don't forget, it's those moments of rest and those moments of music that really work together to create art. And I just want you to remember that. You can find out more about Todd at toddherzog.com. I'll have links to his site and his social media in the show notes. And remember, you can always find out more about what we're doing at nobodiesview.com or thenobodybible.com, or you can reach out to us on Twitter and Facebook at Nobody's View. If you like what you hear on the podcast, please consider a review or a subscription. We'd really appreciate it. Keep practicing and have a good week.